Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections. And today we have Darius Slayton. 6'1", 190 pounds, 24 years old, was a fifth-round pick out of Auburn. Made an immediate impact as a rookie. First game was, Tampa Bay Week 3, Daniel Jones debut, and made some, had a big play in that game and made some plays. In 2020, he took on the wide receiver one role, and he had 50 catches, 751 yards, 3 touchdowns on a 52% catch rate, which was essentially the same exact stats he had as a rookie, where in 2 less games, he had 48 catches, 2 less, 740 yards, 11 less yards, and 8 touchdowns, 5 more touchdowns on a 57% catch rate. Justin, a big question for us going into 2020 was, can Darius Slayton be the number one? We saw week 1, maybe my biggest overreaction of the year, and said yes, and now we know that he cannot be, or should not be.
Yeah, I think cannot be, and should not be. I think they work hand in hand with each other. And Bobby, really, the stat that I think contextualizes Darius Slayton's 2020 the most is that he was 8th in the NFL in percentage of teams' air yards with 34.44%, right next to guys like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, and Justin Jefferson. Darius Slayton received 40% of the team's targets from 15 plus yards last year. So when he was targeted, obviously getting 90 targets is a decent amount. Usually your number one will get 120, 130 targets. He didn't play exactly 100% of the snaps. I think he played like 86, 87% of the snaps. But still, when you're being listed next to guys like that in terms of the amount of targets that you're getting, or just in terms of air yards, I'm speaking of here, when you're next to those guys, those are number one wide receivers, and they're like some of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And Darius Slayton is the outlier on that list. And simply, he should not be relied on like that, like a Tyreek Hill, like a Justin Jefferson. I think that goes without saying. But still, I'm like stuck in this mode with Darius Slayton where I'm kind of frustrated with this 2020 because, we didn't see the same big play potential that we saw in 2019. But then you have to remember, well, this is Jason Garrett. And then you have to, kind of keep in the back of your brain, I guess, well, that ankle injury that we think that he sustained against Washington, that beautiful, 40, 30-yard touchdown that he had against Washington, where it was in the back corner of the end zone, the left corner of the end zone. He came up limping a little bit there. Maybe we're looking at Darius Slayton's 2020, where he misses 2 weeks because of an ankle sprain, let's say, hypothetically. He misses 2 weeks, and then he finishes the season somewhat off well. And we're like, oh, yeah, but he missed the 2 weeks. And if he doesn't miss the 2 weeks, then he has a really good 16-game season. But he played through it. And Sterling Shepard didn't play through it. Golden Tate was missing even when he was on the football field. So I still kind of give credit to Slayton being on the field even when he was hurt, maybe not 100%. So
200-plus yard games in the first 5 games of the season, week 1 versus Pittsburgh and then versus Dallas. He has that touchdown versus Washington to start the game. And the offense was down as a whole. Big part of that was wide receiver play. And, when I said that he had basically the same exact stats in 2 less games as a wide receiver one than he did his rookie season, some has to do with the Shermer Garrett dynamic. That no doubt has something to do with it. But, man, I really do think him getting cornerback one treatment with the safety over the top made a difference. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think Pittsburgh, maybe teams weren't going to do that, that touchdown versus Pittsburgh in the second quarter was a play where they did max play action. They had no safety over the top, and they didn't have that safety shading over, and it was a touchdown, and you remember some of the plays from his rookie season, the 2 touchdowns versus Detroit didn't have safety help over the top. Not great cornerback play. Darius Slay was out that game versus Detroit. The Minnesota game, Sterling Shepard was getting the wide receiver one treatment on the outside. So I really do think he suffered from that. Plus, maybe something to do with the ankle. But I also, his rookie season wasn't fake either. Those weren't 8 fake touchdowns. He was a very big bright spot. So what happened with Darius is he got overrated. But now I think it's totally swung to now where he's kind of underrated by a lot of people. Because I really do like Darius Slayton now that we have a wide receiver one to pair with him. If we didn't get Kenny Golladay, and Kadarius Toney was the draft pick still, we'd probably be like, this is not a great spot for Darius Slayton. But Kenny Golladay, I really do, and I've repeated this take a million times over the offseason, is besides Daniel Jones, the biggest benefactor of the Kenny Golladay signing is Darius Slayton.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with you on that. When Darius Slayton was targeted over 20 yards down the field, his average depth of target was 30 yards. So what that kind of tells me is it's not really closer to 20, where when he was targeted deep, they targeted him deep. And really, there was no kind of diverse way to get Darius Slayton the ball besides just a streaker or post down the field. I actually was going back on some old tweets that I had from, the 2019 season, doing some old 22 when I did a little bit more of that. And I made like a little bit of a compilation of Darius Slayton comeback routes. Big, and I'm not just talking about stick concept where you're running to the sticks and turning around like the Jason Garrett classic, but I'm talking big swooping comeback routes where they're 15 yards down the field and kind of, I guess, still considered in the intermediate part of the field because you're coming back to the football. Getting Darius Slayton the ball, and I guess you could say this about any football player, and we've been saying about it to Evan Ingram for years, right? Getting Darius Slayton the ball in more diverse ways besides just running a streak down the field, I think that kind of needs to be a priority. Where I wasn't really happy with Slayton's 2020 performance is 6 drops. Some of them were costly.
Big ones too.
But 4 of them came from the 0 to 9 yard range, which I don't know if Darius Slayton is ever going to be the kind of receiver where we're going to be consistently relying on creating separation and having consistent catches within that 0 to 9 intermediate range. Darius Slayton, so far in his career, he's been a guy that's going to catch the ball, yards per reception, 15 yards down the field, and his average depth of target is going to be like 13 yards and above. So that's kind of like where he lives and breathes, but also that's not where Jason Garrett lives and breathes.
Some of his drops were really big.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Chicago. Remember Chicago? We forget about that one. 3rd down in the red zone. Yep. He doesn't drop that pass. Maybe we win that game. Philly. Now we ended up winning that game, but the second Philly game, remember the another 3rd down? They were running mesh, wide open. Darius Slayton hits him in the hands, drops it. He had another one versus Dallas, and then remember the Daniel Jones like 70 air yards, and it goes through Darius Slayton's hands.
Oh,
versus Cincy.
Yes.
So he had some big drops, and that's on him. And that was kind of a concern coming out of Auburn. It showed up a little bit as a rookie, but he was making like other plays to where we didn't remember those as much. So he has to clean that up because we're looking to fight for the playoffs this year, and that can be the difference of playoffs and not making the playoffs. And you maybe could say it was last year, but you know what? Every receiver does have drops. So I'm not putting missing the playoffs on Darius Slayton from last year. But what he is good at is beating press man coverage, and especially if he's not facing cornerback ones, is what he's good at. Like you play press man, and you saw it a lot of times where Darius Slayton was, when they didn't have the safety on the top, he would literally just point out to Daniel Jones, be like, look, and that led to some of his big plays, and a lot of, like you said. Now I do want it to be more diverse than just beating press and running fades and go balls, but that also is what made us like Darius Slayton, was those plays,
Right. It's funny how I'm always a fan of, philosophically, when talking about football, of big explosive plays. But then when I break down individual players, I'm like, I want more consistency out of you and moving the chains. So I need to find the happy medium there. But Bobby Skinner, when looking at, his yards per game and his catches per game, there's, particularly last year, it's kind of been the same throughout the first 2 years of his career. 3.1 receptions per game, 3.4 receptions per game, 2020 and then 2019 respectively. And then the yards per game went down a little bit in 2020, but it was still relatively the same, around 47 to 53. That's been his range. So is it crazy that even though we have Kenny Golladay, hopefully Kadarius Toney's going to be here, hopefully Sterling Shepard's going to be here, even though I am expecting Sterling Shepard to miss time, because I think you just should expect that at this point. What I want a whole reception more, and I want 10 more yards. If he ends the year at 4 yards, 66, at 4 catches, 66 yards per game, I'm good with that.
66 is a lot for the number one.
No, I'm
guy.
sorry, 56, because he had 47 last year. So right. I mean, 57 to 60. That's what I meant.
let's say 50, 55 sounds fair to me. 55, because we're not expecting us to be. If we were the Chiefs, if we had Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, yeah, but we don't. We have Jason Garrett and Daniel
Yeah.
Jones, who's on a prove-it year on a team that probably wants to run the ball a little more than most
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah. Quarters 1 through 3 last year. And this is where all the wide receivers. I think Darius Slayton was hurt by this the most. Because most of his big plays came on third down. First and second down, they came largely in the beginning of the season, but then as the Giants, I think the Giants got more conservative as the year went on in terms of them running the ball. Most of his big plays came on third down, where you kind of have to make a big play. But the Giants in quarters 1 through 3, they had one of the highest rush rates in the National Football League, and then in the fourth quarter, they had one of the highest throw rates in the fourth quarter, because they were behind in games. So I think hopefully that's balanced out at least a little bit more, where we're throwing the ball a little bit more throughout the game, and hopefully we're on the ball more in the fourth quarter because we're winning.
Yeah, man. So I'm very excited for Darius Slayton. Like, I can't wait to see how he looks this year with the addition of Kenny Golladay. Like I said, he's good at beating press man, stacking, getting in front of that corner, and getting contested catches with his 4.39 speed. Like, let's not forget, he has 4.39 speed, a 39-inch vertical. Like, he had an awesome combine. He has the speed and the ability to go up and make some plays. So I'm excited for him. Part of him and Daniel Jones connection is what gets me excited for Kenny Golladay, because, like, okay, we see how this can work. Now you add Kenny Golladay instead of Darius Slayton. But I really do think, man, like, I'm excited to see what this year means for Darius Slayton, because honestly, it can, like I said, he went from people being like wide receiver 1 to now people are like, I don't even know if he's a wide receiver 3, which I just flat out disagree with. I think he is your number 2 wide receiver on the outside. And I think that's going to be a good role for him going forward, as long as he's got good QB and decent offensive coordinator play going forward. So anything else you got on Darius Slayton?
Nope. Big piece of what we got to do this year. Be interested to see how his role kind of morphs, because if you're talking about, is he just like a carbon copy of Kenny Golladay in terms of the role that they kind of play? And how good is Kadarius Toney going to be? And what are they planned for Sterling Shepard? It's going to be a fun year, hopefully, for this wide receiver corps, and hopefully a fun year for Darius Slayton, so he can stick around.
Yep. And we'll finish it off real quick. But, we had a conversation with who should they invest more in our wide receiver review at the end of the year, Shepard or Slayton. And I said Slayton. And I think the Kadarius Toney draft pick signals that. So, all right. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys next time. Until then, let's go Big Blue.